Good morning. It is Wednesday, September the 5th. This is The Drill. Good morning. Thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America, because I'm the only conservative that makes the presumption for the status quo. So normally on the left, or anytime they make a gain, it is usually due to the ineptness of the right. It seems to go basically opposite of the way you would think. That if the left makes a gain, you would think that it was because the left has been very strategic and tactical and disciplined, and they earned the victory. And if the right wins, then it's because they earned the victory. But it seems that it just goes the opposite way, that each side merely capitalizes on the errors of the other. Classic examples, 1994, and the Republicans taking over the House of Representatives for the first time in 40 years because the Democrats overreached. The Black Caucus decided they wanted to racially gerrymander so they could get more black seats in Congress, which worked, but it also worked to create more Republican districts. And so the Republican districts outnumbered the Democrat districts, and so the blacks ended up getting more representatives, but they ended up being in the minority party. And so the Republicans backed into power. Of course, they used the contract with America as a little bit of piece of political theater to make it seem as though they earned the victory, but in reality, no, they didn't. So what we got going today is, again, the Republicans are benefiting from errors that made by the Democrats, in particular by Harry Reid, former Senate Majority Leader, now retired, who came up with what was called the Reid Rule, which is the rule that says for any judicial nominations, they cannot be filibustered. Filibuster nowadays means that you would have to have a 2/3 majority in order to be able to break the filibuster. But if there's no filibuster that's going to be allowed, then all you need is a simple majority. And that worked great for the Democrats when they were trying to get judicial nominees on the bench. But now that the Republicans are in power, it works equally well for the Republicans, much to the consternation of the Democrats, who are now sitting around trying to figure out what they can do to try to stop the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh. And really, there is no possible way they can do it. There's nothing they can do to stop the nomination at all. And the person they have to thank is their own. Thank Harry Reid and thank themselves. They went along with it. They didn't rebel against Harry Reid and say, no way, we don't want to do this because in the long term it's going to be bad news for us. No. The hubris of the Democrat Party and the overreaching ended up coming back to bite them in the rear end. So as far as I'm concerned, they get what they deserve. To settle the matter completely in terms of the issue of the filibuster in the Senate, what they should do is go back to the rules in the 1970s, which said that, number one, if a senator wanted to filibuster, they actually had to be on the floor. They had to be on the floor, and they had to be talking. So as long as the senator could hold the floor, the senator could talk, and, there you go. So the other thing is that right now the rule is that if there's a filibuster, all other legislative business comes to a halt. And in the old days, you could have a filibuster, and you could be able to do other Senate business as a result. Or is it the opposite way? I'm going to have to check on that. But anyways, there's a couple of points that was being made by, let me see. Let me read to you from Tom McClintock's article in the January 2017 number 1 of volume 46 issue of Imprimis, in which it's titled "How and Why the Senate Must Reform the Filibuster." Let's see. The parliamentary tactic of a minority thwarting the will of the majority by talking a bill to death is nothing new. The Roman Senate's rules required business to conclude before sunset. Cato the Younger discovered that he could block Julius Caesar's initiatives by talking until dusk descended on the Senate chamber. Caesar responded by throwing Cato in jail. Common parliamentary practice dealt with the tactic by allowing a motion to order the previous question. In other words, to close debate and vote, often requiring a two-thirds vote. This supermajority threshold to close debate is rooted in the principle that a significant minority should be able to extend debate. After all, a minority exists to convince the majority to its way of thinking and often identifies flaws in a proposal that a majority doesn't see in its rush to adopt. This is the fruit of deliberation and the essence of deliberative assemblies. But these parliamentary principles assume there's an actual debate, that it is germane to the subject at hand, and that it is not conducted in a manifestly dilatory manner. Within a few decades of the American founding, senators rediscovered Cato's practice of killing a bill by killing time, and the Senate filibuster was born. Yet it was rarely used because of its natural limitations. A filibustering senator had to remain, for the most part, at his desk and on his feet. In 1908, for example, Robert Lafayette of Wisconsin held the floor for 18 hours, speaking for long periods of time and demanding dozens of quorum calls and roll call votes to stall a banking reform bill. The bill eventually passed, but not without significant consternation on both sides, due to the fact that until the filibustered matter was disposed of, the Senate could not move on to other business. Okay, so let me see. Beginning in 1970, the number of filibusters... Okay, let's see. The first occurred in blah, blah, blah. Magnitude... Oh, okay. But beginning in 1917, the number of filibusters exploded by a magnitude of 36-fold. There have been 1,746 years since then. Why? Because in 70, Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield instituted a two-track system that allowed the Senate, by unanimous consent, or the approval of the minority leader, to bypass a filibustered bill and go on to another. This relieved a filibustering senator of the job of having to talk through the night, and it relieved his colleagues of their frustration. The filibuster thus entered the couch potato world of virtual reality, where an actual speech is no longer required to block a vote. Today, the mere threat of a filibuster suffices to kill a bill as the Senate shrugs and goes on to other business. The filibuster has been stripped of all the unpleasantness that discouraged its use and encouraged compromise and resolution. Whereas the filibuster prior to 1970 was designed to ensure debate, after adoption of the two-track system, it mutated into a procedure that prevents debate. As a result, the greatest deliberative body in the world now has difficulty deliberating on anything of importance. So it is... what he's saying is we need to go back to pre-1970 on this if we really want to have a good permanent solution to this issue of filibusters and whatnot. So that way, it's fair for everybody. The majority can still work its will, but the minority can, like he says, make a statement and encourage debate and perhaps get some kind of compromises to a particular bill or situation that they find distasteful. So today I'm going to be reading from Ayn Rand's lexicon on causality, and also the segment from at least part of the chapter of The Death of Right and Wrong by Tammy Bruce, and I may get to The Black Book of the American Left by David Horowitz when we get back. Okay, thank you very much. And let's see where we at here. There we go. So Ayn Rand, there's a book. It's called the Ayn Rand Lexicon. It's an excellent book to read. It's like a dictionary or glossary, and it covers a lot of her, the main points of her her ideas and whatnot. I was going to say her philosophy, but I don't like to use that term. Her philosophical theory, let's put it that way. So, and it's a good idea. That way you can kind of get into what it is that Ayn Rand's talking about without having to go ahead and slog through some of her books, which can be difficult to read. Very highly conceptual, very abstract. So the one for the entry for today is called causality. The law of causality is the law of identity applied to action. All actions are caused by entities. The nature of an action is caused and determined by the nature of the entities that act. A thing cannot act in contradiction to its nature. The law of identity does not permit you to have your cake and eat it too. The law of causality does not permit you to eat your cake before you have it. To grasp the axiom that existence exists means to grasp the fact that nature, i.e. the universe as a whole, cannot be created or annihilated, that it cannot come into or go out of existence, whether its basic constituent elements or atoms or some of atomic particles or some yet undiscovered forms of energy. It is not ruled by a consciousness or by will or by chance, but by the law of identity. All the countless forms, motions, combinations, and dissolutions of elements within the universe, from a floating speck of dust to the formation of a galaxy to the emergence of a tide, are caused and determined by the identities of the elements involved. Since things are what they are, since everything that exists possesses a specific identity, nothing in reality can occur causelessly or by chance. Choice is not chance. Volition is not an exception to the law of causality. It is a type of causation. So, good stuff there. Let's see what we got next. Oh. There we go. Let's see. Okay, I'll do that. There we go. Get this, doing it on my Kindle. So the next one is, this is from the book by Tammy Bruce called The Death of Right and Wrong. And actually, as I've said before, it's the title isn't quite correct, because as Ayn Rand has noted, that there is no things cannot be created or destroyed. There's a saying, energy cannot be created or destroyed. You can only change its form. So is it with ethics. You cannot create or destroy ethics. You can only change its form. So that means that right and wrong aren't going to go away. They're simply going to change. Okay, what is right and what is wrong will simply mutate and become different than what it was. Certain things that were considered wrong and unacceptable people will or government will pretend is acceptable, and vice versa. So anyways, Tammy Bruce has been going on and giving examples of how, and the good thing about this book that makes it interesting is it shows how culture shapes our politics. And that's the way it works. Rush Limbaugh is wrong, period. When he says that politics shapes our culture. He's wrong, he's wrong, he's wrong, he's wrong. He got it backwards. Okay, that's why one of the interesting things, there's Rush Limbaugh and others have noted that politically we are center-right. And it may very well be. But culturally, we are center-left. And that does not bode well politically if you're of the right, if you're a conservative or true conservative, for the future. It does not bode well for the future at all, because since our culture shapes our politics, and we are now center-left culturally, it's just a matter of time before we become center-left politically. And remember that Venezuela used to be a thriving economy, a viable nation state, let's put it that way, and became a basket case. And it got to the point where it was because the left in Venezuela succeeded in subverting Venezuelan culture. And after they subverted the culture, they were then able to subvert the politics of Venezuela. So with Tammy Bruce here, we've gone through a little bit of her early history, and we went through the idea of, she was talking about various artists that were so-called artists and some of the foul, nasty things that they do and call art. And so, and she was making the point that nobody talks about it in detail, and if more of the detail of the things that these so-called artists do in the name of art were exposed, then people would become horrified and object more strongly. I've disagreed with that because, again, I think the whole point with the left is always revolution. They want to do this as a matter of power. And again, there was a French socialist that wanted to enter something in a contest. He wanted to enter a particular art contest in France, and it was shown the rules. Okay, these are the things that are acceptable, and and nothing else outside these rules are acceptable. And he threw a temper tantrum. How dare you? Who are you to say what is art? Okay, so he entered a urinal. He went out, bought a urinal, signed it, and entered it as a part of this contest. And that's what started all of this movements. When you see the crucifix soaking in urine, when you hear about the Virgin Mary with elephant dung on it, it's all about power. What these so-called artists are telling you is, I can do this, I can call it art, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And its purpose is to make you mad, create social friction in the hopes that somebody is going to go ahead and start the revolution and help to usher in socialist paradise. So we're at Chapter 2, The Left's Inquisition. And the quote from Fyodor Dostoevsky, "Where there is no God, all is permitted." The Holy Virgin Mary is what artist Chris O'Feely titled a collage he presented at the Brooklyn Museum of Art in 1999. In fact, his depiction of Mary was meant to convey something other than holiness. Pieces of elephant dung were stuck all over the image of Mary, and she was surrounded by photos of vaginas from porn magazines. If elephant feces were smeared on the walls of a mosque, it would be a hate crime. Here, smeared on a Christian icon, voila, it's modern art. For me, this isn't about dogma. As I explained in the first chapter, although I respect the core values of Christianity, I am not a member of any church. My frustration and concern stem from the fact that Christianity is the target of the left in this country, while other religions mostly are not. The reason is that Christianity represents to the left the principal threat to their hollow agenda. Well, no, not quite. Christianity is picked out because it's the dominant religion in this country. So there's a lot of revolutionary potential in pissing off Christians. Holy dung. Part of the strategy of every activist working to change societies, literally change what things mean. Supporters of the aforementioned O'Feely work and the artist himself have proclaimed that there is nothing negative in his depiction of Mary. Elephant dung is a symbol of regeneration in the African world. Hence, this is actually a positive religious symbol, misunderstood by conservative religious groups, to say nothing of this feminist lesbian. Make no mistake, the degrading of symbols important to Christianity is, among other things, propaganda. Propaganda meant to change your view of Christianity as a whole. You conservative, religious, hubris-rotted, clueless plebe. A special point, by the way, should not be missed. The pejoratives used to describe those who found the O'Feely work worthy of contempt always included the words religious conservative in one form or another. Then New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani was one of the public figures who had the courage to be outraged by the bigotry in this exhibition. In fact, he threatened to cut the museum's funding if the work was not removed. In a particularly vicious response, Sintra Wilson, a columnist for Salon.com, described Giuliani as delusional and as having hubris-rotted cop brain. Wilson continued, This waist-covered icon is perhaps so moving and terrifyingly effective in its desecration of Roman Catholicism that the shrieking, batshit-encrusted Aboriginal tribe elder Giuliani feels it is reason enough to fuck up an entire museum. And again, you notice what they're doing. They go ahead and do this piece of art. Somebody gets mad, offended, threatens to shut down, take action. And what do? They want to promote that. They want to agitate more, irritate more. So they go ahead and start now insulting Giuliani. There's a whole idea, create a fight. The fight turns into a riot. The riot turns into a civil war, which turns into worldwide revolution, ushering in socialist paradise. Back to the book. As long as you haven't been cowed by the moral relativism of the left, Wilson's screed reveals a great deal about the writer. I think it's fair to say Miss Wilson has some issues of her own, and she, like Ophelia, would do better to deal with them in private. For these leftists, however, that's impossible. Their very identities rely on joining in the cacophony, supporting, contributing to, and defending the cannibalization of our culture toward the end of destroying the notion of right and wrong. And I've already covered that it's not going to destroy it. They simply want to change it. Because in socialist paradise, so-called socialist paradise, you think there's not going to be any right and wrong? You think there's no right and wrong in Venezuela? Of course there is. It's just changed. Whereas it used to be perfectly acceptable to criticize an administration and be opposed to the administration and go out and protest against that administration is now forbidden. You go out and do that, then you are liable to be imprisoned or worse. So, attacks on Christianity in the art world are defended as exercises of freedom of expression, of course, and as complex artistic critical commentaries on religion. One art world denizen patronizingly argued that there is really no conflict at all, simply a Philistine misunderstanding of the art by its religious opponents. The "you just don't understand" strategy is one of the left's most powerful tools. The cultural gatekeepers are in charge, and they do understand, so you be quiet and learn to understand. These classic thought police attacks on those who speak up in defense of Christianity certainly send the message that taking such a stand is dangerous and costly, and even perhaps wrong. These attacks are part of the effort to condition you not only into silence, but even into questioning your own belief system and moral foundation. The religious and or conservative, God help you if you're a combo, are truly the new marginalized and also, and more menacingly, the new approved of targets. Whether you are genuinely religious and conservative, or liberal and simply disgusted by what you see, the put-downs and the name-calling have their effect. When the bashing of Christian symbols is so prevalent, so mainstream, it effectively distorts our views of Christians and Christianity, arguably even Christians' view of themselves. And not only that, but normally what would have happened decades ago is that anybody that would have dared to do this would have been met with not just criticism from one mayor, but from every Christian church, Catholic and Protestant, and very possibly non-Christian churches in the United States of America. The opposition to something like that would be so quick and so overwhelming that the artist wouldn't even get a hearing. They wouldn't even be able to display their work at all anywhere. It just wouldn't happen. But one of the things that the left has done is subvert Christian churches. There's a Christian church in Pasadena, California. It's called I think it's the First Methodist Episcopal Church, and it's over on, I believe it is Euclid. And, it's on Euclid. Euclid between Walnut and Colorado. And so it's been in the news because it's basically what it is not a Christian church at all. It is a socialist clubhouse. Okay, that socialists have infiltrated the clergy, Catholic clergy and Protestant clergy, and have forced churches and to go to the left, to be, again, basically mouthpieces for socialist propaganda and turning them into socialist clubhouses. But again, they wear the Christian accoutrement so that they can shield themselves from criticism. So this particular church in Pasadena regularly preaches political things, which no church is supposed to do, because they're exempt from having to pay taxes. And in return, they're supposed to keep everything religious. You're not supposed to be out promoting politics, because if you're going to be doing that, then you're really not a church. You're not a religious body at all. And this place isn't. All it concerns itself with is secular, worldly issues, primarily homosexuality. Who can sleep with whom and who can get married to whom and all that stuff. And that's irrelevant to a church, any Christian church. Because ultimately what Christian churches, Catholic or Protestant, are concerned with is your immortal soul. And what's going to happen to your immortal soul after you die. Is it going to spend eternity in heaven or in hell? And so, again, that's what happens here. That's why you don't hear the outcry today that you would have heard 30, 40, 50 years ago from the churches, because a lot of them are left. So they see this kind of thing being portrayed, which hurts, this type of so-called art in which the Virgin Mary is desecrated, and they end up saying nothing, because they're lefties. They're really not churches at all. The Episcopal Church in the United States may as well just go ahead and become an arm of the Communist Party. And Catholic Church is rapidly getting to that point. We have a pontiff now that is very far to the left. So, and again, meaning that they are more concerned with worldly issues. The Pope today seems to want to spend more time scolding governments and government leaders about worldly issues than concerning himself, again, with each person's immortal soul and getting those souls to come to Christ. So, okay, when I come back, we're going to see about doing a little bit of the Black Book of the American Left. Thank you very much. Black Book of the American Left, excellent book because, again, David Horowitz, former communist himself, he called himself a red diaper baby, and he had an epiphany, so to speak. One of the Black Panthers ended up killing a woman that he had recommended for a job. She ended up getting that job and ended up being murdered by one of those Black Panthers. And it was the Panthers' reaction to it, and also the response and reaction by the left at large to this lady named Betty, her death and her murder, that convinced him that something was not quite right here, and caused him to examine his beliefs and eventually quit the left. So he's got a lot of insights about the left and how the left works culturally and politically. So, Chapter 8, Reflections on the Road Taken and Not. The other day I received an email from a stranger posing two questions that have been on my mind for some time, which made this message seem uncannily personal. I was curious, the writer said, if you've ever looked at your political apostasy and wonder whether, if circumstances had been different, if you had not been involved with the Panthers, or if your friend had not been murdered by them, you would still be a Marxist today. Was your apostasy a result of inexorable intellectual development, or were you forced into your second thoughts? In one form or another, that is a question just about everyone gets around to asking. If circumstances had been different, would my life have turned out so differently? It is a question as old as philosophy, the puzzle of determinism and free will. Not everyone, of course, experiences such a dramatic turning point in life as I did 25 years ago when the Black Panthers murdered Betty Van Patter. But we all can identify choices or decisions that changed our lives, moments when we suddenly set out on a new course. Each time those kinds of changes occur, they raise the question, are they essential to our being or only secondary to who and what we are? In my case, I simply don't know whether the intensity of my ideological transformation would have been the same had it not been provoked by an act of criminal brutality committed by my political allies and friends. But I am confident that the change would have come in any case. I have many friends and acquaintances who had similar second thoughts in which they found themselves rejecting the ideas and understandings that had motivated them when they were young. And I have no reason to suppose it would have been different for me. In fact, one of the first pieces I wrote about the incident that changed my political life was an article called Why I Am No Longer a Leftist, which appeared in 1986 in The Village Voice. It drew explicit parallels between the crime the Panthers had committed and the much larger, more famous crimes that the broader left had committed, crimes that had caused people like me to reconsider our beliefs. As a leftist, I had developed habits of mind that caused me to look at classes rather than individuals, at social structures and general paradigms rather than at particular events or individual personalities that could be dismissed as incidental or unique. This way of looking at things led me to analyze events with an eye as to whether they were broadly characteristic or merely contingent, and to do so before I would consider allowing the lessons I draw from them to affect my outlook as a whole. I made such an analysis in the article I wrote for The Village Voice as in my memoir, Radical Son. The impact of these events in my case was dramatic. Nobody knew me then and knows me now. Nobody who knew me then and knows me now has failed to notice the differences in my life and attitudes. The trauma of this murder and the betrayal it represented had a profound effect on me and made me a different person than I otherwise might have been. It was the pain that caused me to change. Every day after Betty's murder, the pain spoke to me. You cannot stay in this place if you don't move. You will die. It is fear that normally keeps us in our personal grooves, but now I was caught between the fear of moving and the greater one of not moving. It was pain that inspired me to overcome inertia in order to escape what I felt was a spiritual death. A second question raised in that email was unexpected and even more perplexing than the first. Do you ever feel that you are wasting your breath? Do you think the truth will ever matter? No matter what you prove or disprove, in the end, the truth will remain in the shadows of what people want to hear and want to believe. I agree with the observation more than I would like to. It is the human wish to be told lies that keeps us as primitive morally and socially as we are. But Stoic realism is, after all, what being a conservative is about. It is accepting the absolute limits that life places on human hope. One could define the viewpoint of the left as just the opposite. It is an obstinate, compulsive, destructive belief in the fantasy of change, in the hope of a human redemption. And again, that paragraph right there sums up everything that I've been saying, perhaps summing it up better than I do, or I have. Basically that the right is about realism and that the left is about idealism. And I don't mean just a casual ideal, this is the ideal restaurant or whatever. I'm talking about utopian ideal, absolute perfection. Back to the book. I've watched my friends on the left whose ideas created an empire of inhumanity, survive the catastrophe of their schemes, and go on to unexpected triumphs by turning their backs on the ashes of their ideological defeats. Forced to witness the collapse of everything they once dreamed of and worked to achieve, they have emerged unchastened and unchanged in pursuit of the same destructive illusions. And they have been rewarded for their misdeeds with a cultural cachet and unprecedented influence in the country most responsible for the worldwide defeat of their misguided schemes. This is something that Rush Limbaugh has touched on many times in his show, where he says that the cachet of the left is defeat. That if you want to be really show what kind of a badass you are in terms of being a lefty, then it's all the defeats that you brag about that will bring that about, rather than your successes or victories. Back to the book. I cannot explain this dystopian paradox except by agreeing with my interlocutor that politics is indeed irrational and that socialism is a wish that runs as deep as any religious faith. I do not know that the truth must necessarily remain in the shadows, as he writes, but I am persuaded that a lie grounded in human desire is too powerful for mere reason to kill. So as far as the truth part of it is, and that we like to live on lies and stuff, BS. What you really have, everybody responds to the truth and wants the truth, because we're all asking the same question of ourselves and of each other, and that is, what do I need to do? What should I do now? And to the end of being happy. We all are looking for the same damn thing. Aristotle discovered this 2,000 years ago, that every human being is looking to be happy. And in order to be happy, we know that we have to find the truth about any given situation. We may decide to defer it. We may decide to go along with a lie for various reasons, maybe to save our life, maybe because we find the lie much easier to deal with at this particular moment. But eventually we will get around and want to get around to acknowledging the truth. And the truth being a universal, that meaning that which is true for everybody, everywhere, at all times. Okay, so that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And I thank you very much for listening to me. And until next time, have a great day.